What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another fly tying tutorial. Today we're going to be tying up this little Spey fly. This right here is a woolly bugger variant, really similar to a regular woolly bugger. I've just changed a couple things, added a couple things to kind of make it my own. I've had some comments and some questions asking me to tie some Spey flies, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to start a little series here with Spey flies, since steelhead is in most parts. We're going to start off with this little woolly bugger, then we can get into some truder flies as well as some more complicated Spey flies. But I'm going to get a fresh hook in the vise and we'll get going with this tutorial. So the hook I'm using is a Mustad. This is the salmon single. This is in a size 4. You can tie these size 6, size 4, then all the way up to like a 1. The thread we're going to be using, just some black GSP. This is a Vivus. And this is 50. So I'm just going to start my thread on top of that shank there, cut out my tag end. Then I'm just going to dress this hook to about the hook barb, bring it back up. And the reason why I'm dressing this all the way is because when I tie in my marabou for the tail, I don't want it to spin on the bare shank. So I'm just going to bring that to about halfway down the shank, and we're going to be tying in some marabou. This is Scalded Olive strung marabou. So I'm just going to find a nice little piece here. And what I like to do is actually, instead of tying it in like how you traditionally would, just like this, I'm actually going to pull strands off from the side of the stem. So I'm just going to kind of get some nice pieces here. So I'm going to probably grab a nice little clump to start out with. About a ½ an inch long off the stem. I'm just going to keep those butts aligned. And what I like to do is I like to get my nail and rip all this stringy part off. As you can see, they're kind of really straight and stringy ends. I just like to grab my finger and kind of break most of that off, so it's kind of left like that. Now what I like to do is kind of just pull a little bit, just to put a little taper into it, just so it's not straight across. Just add a nice little taper to it, and we're gonna make this tail about the length of the body, or the length of the shank, sorry. So I'm just going to tie that in. We're going to bring this down all the way to our end of our under wraps here. You want to keep this all smooth because we're going to be tying in a tinsel body. You want that to lay nice and flat. So I'm bringing this up, then kind of just come in with my scissors, cut this out. So we're going to add a little bit more to that tail, and we're just going to do the same thing. Just going to pull it off. So here's the stem. I'm just going to pull a little bit off the side of the stem there. And I just like this because I can control how much I'm putting in, if I need to add some or take some out, and I can taper it nice. That's one thing I like having control over, is the taper, because you don't want that straight across. You want it to look as natural as possible when it's going through the water. So I'm just going to do the same thing here, keeping this right on top of the shank, kind of just slowly lifting up on it while I turn it down onto the top, just so it doesn't roll on me. So if you just lift kind of up on it just lightly, it should stay on top of that shank for you. So I'm just going to cut out all these little fluffy butt ends, kind of clean this up just a bit, just like so. Now we can start tying in our body. The first material we're going to be tying in is our rib. This is going to be some UTC ultra wire. This is a medium and it's olive. So I'm going to tie this in kind of right underneath here and bring this all the way back. As you can see, my body part here is really smooth. You want to keep this as smooth as possible. For the actual body part, we're going to be using some of this lateral scale. It's kind of a black olive, kind of a green color. It is a 1760, the model number. So I'm just going to cut a little piece off. The easiest way that I find to wrap this in is when you cut it off, it's going to be square. What I like to do is just get my scissors and cut it on a little angle there. So when you wrap it in, it turns over really nice. So I'm just going to tie that tip part in right at the end there. Now we're going to tie in our hackle. For hackle, we're just going to be using some olive color. And I like to keep this hackle relatively shorter. You can make it as long as the bottom of the point. That's pretty much as long as I would go. I don't want this too long because I still want it to cut through the water pretty nice. And I think that is the perfect length, just right around the hook point there. So I'm going to tie this in on the side facing towards the camera because we're going to counter wrap this in. Just going to cut this a bit. Just so that first wrap is easy to get in. We're going to take this down all the way. We're going to bring it up. I like to bring my thread about halfway, so when I'm wrapping in my body, I can wrap my thread up with it, so when I go to tie it off, it's right there. So I'm just going to grab that body right now, and as you can see, because I cut it, it turns over quite nice. Sits exactly where I want it to. So I'm just going to make slight overlapping wraps up this body, and every couple wraps I can kind of pull down on it, and it's just going to keep it nice and flat, tight to those thread wraps so it doesn't start popping out on me. As you can see now, every turn I bring it up, my thread comes with it, so when I go to tie this off, my thread's going to be right there. Ready for me, because I'm kind of keeping a lot of pressure on this lateral scale material because I want it to be nice and flat. So I go to tie it off right there, my thread is right there, ready, so I don't have to kind of let go any pressure. So I'm just going to tie that off, cut that out. Now we're going to grab our hackle, kind of just preen this back a little bit with my fingers. And we're going to counter wrap this hackle. So I'm just going to make open spiral wraps up this body. And as you can see, all the fibers are laying rearward. That's what you want. So I'm just going to come up to there, tie that off nice and tight, and cut that stem out, just like so. Now I'm going to grab my wire, and I'm going to just rib this normally. And since I counter wrapped the hackle, this wire is going to hold down that hackle stem. So if I do get a fish, it doesn't rip it, since it is just on this tinsel. It's not going to break out on me. So I'm kind of just wrapping this, try not to trap many fibers, but it's okay if you do. Trap a couple. Kind of zigzag your way through till you get to your original tie-off point. I'm just going to tie that down nice and tight. Then I can just helicopter that wire off. Kind of just pick out this a bit. Kind of clean up that head just a bit there. Now we're just going to add a little dubbing loop in here. And if you don't have a dubbing loop tool, you can just add a little bit of dubbing and kind of pick it out. I just like adding a dubbing loop because it's just easier, and I like how tight I can spin it. So we're just going to add a little bit of ice dub here. This is going to be a little bit of pheasant tail. And this is just going to be sparse. All I'm doing is kind of adding a little bit of flash into the fly. And I don't like to add any crystal flash off the tail. I like to kind of keep the tail part as natural as possible. So I'm just going to add a little bit of this through the body. So I'm just going to spin this up. Get my little piece of Velcro here. Brush it all out. I'm just going to just palmer this in. Just like that. I can tie that off now. And cut out my loop. Now we're just going to add a little soft hackle collar in here. And for that we're just going to be using some Hungarian partridge. Just going to kind of pull some of this out. As you can see, it's not really heavy, just enough to add a little bit of flash to it. So we're going to add a little bit of Hungarian partridge for the collar. It's going to be a soft hackle. This right here is olive, and I'm going to grab the pieces right near the top, kinda about, I wouldn't say halfway, a little bit above the halfway point. And we're going to grab two. We're going to tie two in. So I'm going to get two feathers from the same spot, so they're the same size. And we're just going to strip the sides off. I mean, if you want, you can leave a little bit of that fluffy marabou there. This adds a little bit more bugginess to the fly if you like. I personally like to leave it. So we're just going to prep these two feathers to tie in. And the easiest way is just kind of grab the tip here and pull it back. Then I'm just going to put these two together, and since they're pretty much the same size, they line up really nice. Then once I have them together, I can kind of just cut that little piece that I used a little bit smaller for my tie-in anchor. I'm going to tie that in. You want to make sure that this is nice and tight in there, especially with this GSP. It does tend to slide a little because it is a coated thread. So I'm just going to grab these two feathers, just preen them back, tie in this nice little collar. And every time I'm wrapping, I'm using my fingers and just gently stroking these back so they all lay rearward, nice and flat. Once we bring that up, we can just tie off those two stems, trying to keep some nice pressure on those stems as well so they don't slide out. If you've got a couple wraps in there, you can just cut out these stems as close as possible, kind of just pull back everything and build up a nice little head here. So I'm just going to throw a couple whip finishes in here to build up this head, as well as just adding a little bit more durability to that head with a couple. Pull that tight, and I can cut out my thread there. You can kind of just trim out any of the stray fibers. Now I'm going to get a little bit of Loon Outdoors fluorescing flow. Just hit this head with that. So it's going to make it nice and shiny, as well as it's going to soak into those thread wraps and just add tons of durability to that fly. So once you wait a couple seconds and know that it's soaked down, you can just hit that with your torch, and you'll be ready to fish. So like I said, this is a nice little pattern to start out with if you're just learning to tie spey flies or wanting to learn how to swing spey flies. So once that's nice and cured, throw it in your fly box, and you're ready to hit the river. So you can tie these in all kinds of different colors. I personally like this olive. Like you can tie it up in white as well, black, purple. The kind of color combinations are endless. You can change the hackle with the tail, the body, kind of just let your imagination go and tie up a bunch and fish them and test them out and see if they work. It's the only way you can really find out what colors work on your river. So hope you liked today's video, guys. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, just drop that down in the comment section below. If you want to see the list of materials I used on this fly, you can check that in the description. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Thanks a lot again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.